Hey, welcome guys. So today I wanted to do a whiteboard. I just feel like doing this whiteboard for um, a situation with World Mobile that Mickey mentioned about us having an opportunity to actually acquire um, equity on World Mobile. So what he mentioned is he said he hasn't come out with the full details, but from what he told us, he said that World Mobile, um, it's going into a new era, in where us, the people that been here um, for a while, um, we will have an opportunity to get equity on the company. So what I wanted to do today was I wanted to actually show the numbers and the way I will value at a company. Like if I put equity on a company, the way I would do it is I will see what the value of the company is, right? So if we look at it like a starting point, right? So before you buy an equity, the first thing you want to do is you first want to ask you want to ask whether the company has value or not. So what I'm saying is if you're buying it, are you gonna buy it on a good price or are you gonna buy it in an overvalued price? Because if you buy it on a good price, then that's a great investment. But if you're buying it on an overvalued price, then now you're talking about just a bad investment. Because that's what some companies do. Some companies they overvalue a price of equity, or they do potential future value of a company, but in reality, it never even gets there. So you just lose your money. So that's one thing I wanted to. That's one thing I wanted to speak of. So let's just ask, what is equity basically? So equity just means you buy a piece of like the actual company, not the token, but the actual piece of the company. And the more the company grows in value, the more that piece that you bought also grows in value. But that only helps you if you bought it in the right valuation. That goes back to square one and what I meant before. So we can start off with, I'll go ahead and draw a box here. So this box here equals World Mobile. I should zoom out a little bit. So that's the company, right? Let's say you buy a small piece. So I don't know. Let's just say you buy a little pie, a little pie of the slice, and this is 1% of what you bought. So depending on how much the company grows, obviously your valuation is going to grow as well. So what formula would I personally use to evaluate a telecommunication company? Well, the first thing I will go is I will look at the ARPU. So the ARPU of a how do you spell ARPU of a company? Let me zoom back out. The ARPU of a company. So what I would do is, let's say users, spell that out, users, and we multiply the users by the ARPU of what they're bringing in, and then you multiply that by a year, right? Users, multiply that by ARPU, multiply that by a year. That will give you the. So the users just means, how many paying users they have, right? The ARPU basically means the average revenue per user for that month. So a great example would be, let's say, a simple example. Let's just say World Mobile has 8 million users, like I mentioned in my last video, right? Let's just say that. And let's say they make around $3 per user. So if we use this formula here, we can do 8 million, multiply it by the ARPU, which is $3, right? And then we'll multiply that by a year. So that should give, if I'm not mistaken, $288 million that year. So if we do this formula here, now revenue by itself does not tell you the company's value. That's one thing I do gotta say. What you need is you need a valuation multiple. So like a company can trade in multiples for the revenue, right? Depending on like the confidence for the company, etc., etc. So if we do a formula for that, I'll say valuation equals revenue, and then multiply that by multiple. So for something like this, I will probably think of like a certain range. So like not the exact multiple, but like a certain range. So back to what I was saying, we're gonna have three valuations. The first valuation, we're gonna call it the lowercase scenario, right? Let's say a multiple of three 3x, and then you got the mid tier one, which is let's say a 5x, and then obviously you have the high case scenario, which is a multiple of 8x. Let's say that's an 8x, right? So if we do each one of these, let's say we multiply 288 million. So this is what I mean with the multiple. You multiply 288 times 3, which will be a evaluation of 864 million. 288 million multiplied by a 5x valuation, which can give you 1.44 billion valuation on a company. And then you have the 8x multiple, which will give you a valuation of $2.3 billion. This is how I would structure a valuation of a company by using these X multiples. So, for example, I might say the company could reasonably be worth somewhere between 864 million to 2.3 billion dollars using those X multiples. So the reason why entry valuation matters is because the valuation basically they actually letting the community buy at a certain level. So you be able to tell what you're buying from, right? Because you're not just gonna jump into equity on a company if you don't even know the valuation on the company. So another case I want to talk about is this thing. You can call it either is a steal or here. Let me write it. This is how I will think about it. Whether you have it as a steal, fair, or a trap for the investment. So what would be considered a steal? So, for my opinion, a steal would be something that's below. What is a fair value? So, a fair value would be something that's reasonable. So, if we estimate, let's say, a fair value is maybe around, I don't know, 1 billion to 1.5 billion dollars, then getting in far below than that is will be a pretty good investment. Now, getting around that area, it's reasonable. But if they value it higher than what it really is, then that's not good. That's just a trap for any investor. So I mean, you can still make returns from it, but it's gonna take longer. So most people think like if I invest in a company, then as long as the company does better, then I will do better. But technically, if a company is worth 500 million dollars, but you did an investment value at $1 billion, then you will have to wait for that company to actually get a fair value at around 1 billion in order to get your money back in the first place. Second of all, there's no guarantee it will actually succeed from it. So, what will make a great investment? A great investment is something that's either less than the fair value or close to the fair value of the company. Another thing that I would look into for this, right? For owning equity on World Mobile is certain things. Like, for example, now do I have exposure to the actual liquidity or is it some other type of exposure? That will be one. The second will be whether or not I can go ahead and sell my equity. Do I have an exit plan or do I have an exit way, or am I locked in the contract with World Mobile. That's another thing that we'll look at. And then another thing will be is you know what rights do I have as an investor? So, as I was saying, like you can have a good valuation, but then again, the structure like of the deal could be bad. So another great way of doing it is so another way I see it. Where's my pen? Okay, there it is. Another way I see it is, I also compare equity to WMTX. I also compare it to Earth nodes, and I also compare it to air nodes. So technically, you don't have to have equity on the company if you have exposure to these three items. You still have some type of upside, right? Well, I mean, That's where it goes back to what I said. If you can have a good fair value on how much they're gonna sell the equity for, then it could be a good investment. Me personally, what I would do is once they come out and tell us how much we're paying for, what I would do is I would say, okay, how much, and it goes back to what I spoke before. Okay, cool. How much? Where is it that I wrote it down? Right here. How much users do we have? Multiply that by the RPU we get so far, and then we multiply that by 12, which then will give us the yearly revenue. And once we do that, it will give us the total amount where mobile makes a year. And then from there, once we get that, we can do the multiple. So if we get the yearly revenue and we multiply that by these three multiples, we'll be able to tell what the valuation on the company should be, and that's how you'll be able to tell whether or not the equity is a good investment or a bad investment. So the honest truth for me is, I will buy some equity for World Mobile, but the question is whether or not would I buy it at a lower case or a high case. Because if they're giving us equity at a higher level or a higher valuation than what the company really is, then I'm not buying any equity for World Mobile. It makes no sense. I mean, I understand that they're trying to get more revenue, or I'm sorry, more capital to scale faster, which is completely fine. But again, to who expense, right? Not my expense, maybe yours. But yeah, that's all I got. You guys take care and have a great one.